3 hours later, Karen sat in her pristine living room, still wearing the security guard uniform, but stripped of all pretense. Sheriff Martinez occupied David's old recliner, a chair that hadn't been sat in since the funeral 18 months ago. The irony wasn't lost on her. The county prosecutor could press charges, he said carefully, watching Karen touch a cup of coffee with hands that had finally stopped shaking. Impersonating an officer, creating a public disturbance, interfering with traffic. But given the circumstances, I wasn't impersonating a police officer, Karen interrupted, a spark of her old defiance flickering. I said HOA enforcement. That's completely different. Sheriff Martinez almost smiled. You wore a security uniform and set up what looked like an official checkpoint, Karen, on a public road, with fake citations. Brittany sat on the couch beside her mother, close enough to intervene if necessary. She'd called in sick to work, something she'd never done before, because the woman who'd raised her to be responsible and respectful had just spent the morning terrifying neighbors with imaginary authority. Mom, Brittany said softly. Dr. Chen, Mrs. Chen's husband, he called. He wants to know if you'd like to talk to someone. Professionally. Karen's jaw tightened. I don't need therapy. I need people to follow the rules. Whose rules? Sheriff Martinez asked. Because I checked with the county assessor's office. The HOA board hasn't met officially in 6 months. No new regulations have been filed. And according to your neighbors, you've been interpreting existing rules pretty creatively. The truth sat in the room like an unwelcome guest. Karen had been making up violations, creating problems that didn't exist, because solving problems, even imaginary ones, made her feel useful, needed, important. Mrs. Patterson's coming back from Florida early, Sheriff Martinez continued. She wants to call an emergency board meeting. Discuss your leadership style. Karen set down her coffee cup with trembling hands. Margaret Patterson had been her ally, her supporter through 3 elections. If Margaret was turning against her, they're going to remove me, aren't they? Probably, he said honestly. But Karen, maybe that's not the worst thing. When's the last time you did something because you enjoyed it, not because you thought you had to? Karen stared at the wall where her collection of HOA meeting minutes was displayed in matching frames. 3 years of her life reduced to bureaucratic documentation. When had she become this person? This angry, frightened woman who saw threats in flower boxes and revolution in slightly overgrown lawns. I used to garden, she whispered, the admission surprising even herself. David and I had the most beautiful roses. I haven't touched them since he died. Brittany's hand found her mother's. We could work on them together. When I visit. Sheriff Martinez stood up, straightening his uniform. I'm not filing charges, Karen. But if there's another checkpoint, official or otherwise, that's going to change. Understood? Karen nodded, feeling smaller than she had in years. After he left, mother and daughter sat in silence, surrounded by the evidence of Karen's obsession with control. HOA binders, violation notices, measurement tools for grass height, and fence positioning. The detritus of a woman who'd lost herself in other people's business. Mom, Brittany said finally, what if we took down some of these displays? Made room for something new? Karen looked around her sterile living room, then toward the kitchen window that faced her neglected garden. In the distance, she could see neighbors removing the traffic cones she'd abandoned, working together to clear the street. For the first time in months, Karen Weatherby smiled, not the sharp, triumphant grin of catching a violation, but something softer, more genuine. I'd like that, she said. But first, I think I owe some people apologies. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across Maple Grove Drive, where life continued its messy, imperfect, beautifully human course, with or without Karen's permission. Karen Weatherby adjusted her reflective safety vest one final time and stepped into the middle of Maple Grove Drive, clipboard in hand. The orange traffic cones she borrowed from a construction site formed a perfect V-shape, funneling morning commuters directly toward her makeshift checkpoint. Ma'am, you can't just, began Mrs. Chen from 412 Oak Street, rolling down her Honda's window. Stop, Karen's voice boomed with the authority of someone who'd spent 3 years perfecting her HOA board meeting presence. I'm conducting mandatory vehicle inspections under Homeowners Association Regulation 47B. Your bumper sticker violates our community aesthetic standards. Mrs. Chen blinked at the rainbow coexist decal. That's not even a real regulation. Karen scribbled furiously on her clipboard, her pen clicking with each dramatic flourish. That's a $75 fine for non-compliance, plus $50 for questioning HOA authority. She tore off a carbon copy from what appeared to be a restaurant receipt book she'd repurposed with impressive creativity. Behind Mrs. Chen, a line of increasingly agitated neighbors stretched back to the main road. Bob Martinez honked his horn. Karen, move. Some of us have actual jobs. Mr. Martinez, Karen called out, not bothering to look up from her paperwork. That's an additional $25 noise violation fee. Your lawn was 3/4 of an inch too long last Tuesday, and now this outburst. We'll be having words at the next board meeting. What Karen didn't notice was the small crowd gathering on sidewalks, phones raised, recording every moment of her theatrical performance. Her daughter Brittany, home from college, watched from their front window with a mixture of horror and fascination as her mother transformed their quiet suburban street into her personal kingdom. The morning sun glinted off Karen's newly laminated Deputy HOA Enforcement Officer badge, a title she'd invented and awarded to herself just yesterday during what she called an emergency executive session, really just her, alone in her kitchen, with a bottle of wine and a laminator she'd bought specifically for this purpose. I need to see your vehicle registration, proof of HOA dues payment, and a signed affidavit that you've read the updated parking guidelines, Karen announced to each driver, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd never been told no and intended to keep it that way. The checkpoint was her masterpiece, weeks in the planning, executed with military precision. She'd even worn her late husband's old security guard uniform, tailored to fit her smaller frame, but still carrying that lingering scent of authority and Old Spice. But as Karen basked in her moment of supreme power, she failed to notice the sheriff's cruiser slowly approaching from the opposite direction, its driver already radioing for backup after receiving multiple calls about a crazy lady blocking traffic. Sheriff Martinez, no relation to horn-honking Bob, stepped out of his patrol car with the weary expression of someone who dealt with Karen Weatherby before. 3 times to be exact, twice for noise complaints about other people's noise, and once for attempting to place a citizen's arrest on a FedEx driver who'd parked illegally in her driveway while delivering her own package. "Morning, Karen," he called out, his voice carrying across the street like a dinner bell. "Beautiful day for traffic control." Karen's head snapped up from her clipboard, and for a split second, doubt flickered across her face. But it was quickly replaced by the steely determination that had made her the most feared HOA board member in Maple Grove's history. Sheriff Martinez. Perfect timing. She strode toward him with the confidence of someone who genuinely believed she was saving the neighborhood. "I'm conducting official HOA business. These residents have been flagrantly violating community standards, and someone needs to." "Karen." His voice cut through her monologue like a hot knife through butter. "Where did you get that badge?" Karen's hand instinctively moved to the laminated rectangle pinned to her vest. "This is my official Deputy HOA Enforcement Officer credential, issued by." "By who exactly?" Sheriff Martinez stepped closer, and several drivers rolled down their windows to hear better. Mrs. Chen had already started recording again. The board, in executive session, last night." Karen's voice wavered slightly, but she doubled down. "We voted unanimously to grant me expanded enforcement powers. All 3 board members." The sheriff's eyebrow raised, "Including yourself." A bead of sweat rolled down Karen's forehead despite the cool morning air. "Yes, obviously. Democratic process and all that." "And the other 2 members, Mrs. Patterson and Mr. Kowalski, they were present for this vote?" The truth was, Margaret Patterson had been in Florida visiting her grandchildren for 2 weeks, and Stanley Kowalski had explicitly told Karen He wanted nothing to do with her neighborhood Nazi routine after she tried to fine him for his garden gnomes being aggressively whimsical. They participated via teleconference. Karen lied, her clipboard trembling slightly in her grip. Sheriff Martinez nodded slowly, then reached for his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 7. Can you patch me through to Mrs. Margaret Patterson? I have her son's cell number in my contacts. The color drained from Karen's face. Around them, neighbors had begun emerging from their houses, drawn by the spectacle like moths to a flame. Her daughter Brittany had finally worked up the courage to approach, still in her pajamas. Mom, Brittany whispered urgently, maybe you should just. Don't you start. Karen whirled around, her authority mask slipping. I am protecting this community. Someone has to maintain standards. These people think they can just paint their front doors whatever color they want, park boats in their driveways, let their grass grow wild. The radio crackled to life. Unit 7, I've got Mrs. Patterson on the line. She says she's been in Clearwater Beach for 2 weeks and has no idea what you're talking about. A collective ooh rippled through the growing crowd. Karen's fake badge suddenly felt very heavy. Karen's world began crumbling with the precision of a controlled demolition. First, her hands started shaking, just a tremor, really, but enough to make her drop the clipboard. The official-looking papers scattered across the asphalt like autumn leaves, revealing themselves to be a chaotic mix of actual HOA regulations, printed internet articles about neighborhood watch best practices, and what appeared to be a grocery list. Mrs. Weatherby, Sheriff Martinez said gently, his tone shifting from interrogation to something approaching compassion. I need you to step away from the traffic cones. No. The word came out smaller than Karen intended. She cleared her throat and tried again. No, I'm not finished. These people need to understand that rules matter, order matters. Her voice cracked on the last word. Brittany moved closer to her mother, recognizing the signs of an impending breakdown. She'd seen it before, during the divorce proceedings after Dad's funeral, whenever Karen felt the world slipping beyond her control. Mom, please, Brittany whispered. Everyone's watching. And they were. Mrs. Chen had lowered her phone, but kept recording. Bob Martinez sat in his truck with the engine idling, no longer angry but genuinely concerned. Even the teenagers from the end of the street had wandered over, their usual mockery replaced by something uncomfortably close to pity. Sheriff Martinez keyed his radio again. Dispatch, cancel that backup request. We're going to handle this quietly. But Karen heard quietly as surrender, and surrender wasn't in her vocabulary. She grabbed her laminated badge and held it up like a shield. This is real authority, she shouted, her voice carrying across the neighborhood. I didn't ask for this responsibility, but someone has to care. Someone has to notice when Mr. Peterson's fence is 6 inches too high, or when the Johnsons leave their Christmas lights up until March. Karen. Sheriff Martinez stepped closer, his hands visible and empty. When's the last time you took a vacation? Visited friends? Did something just for yourself? The question hit Karen like a physical blow. When was the last time? Before David died? Before the kids moved away? Before she'd appointed herself the guardian of suburban perfection, because it was easier than facing the silence in her empty house. Karen's voice faltered. The badge fell from her fingers, hitting the pavement with a hollow plastic sound. I can't. Around them, the crowd had grown strangely quiet. Even the morning birds seemed to have paused their songs. Sheriff Martinez nodded to his radio. Unit 7, we'll need a wellness check follow-up, not an arrest. He looked back at Karen, with eyes that had seen too many people break down in public. Let's get you home, Karen. Your daughter can drive your car. But the checkpoint. Karen gestured weakly at her abandoned traffic cones. I'll handle the cones, said Bob Martinez, climbing out of his truck. Maybe we all could have been a little more patient. As Brittany gently guided her mother toward their house, Karen caught sight of her reflection in Mrs. Chen's car window. The security guard uniform hung loose on her frame, the safety vest garish and childish in the morning light. She looked like exactly what she was, a lonely woman playing dress-up, desperately trying to matter in a world that had moved on without her.